morning, everybody. It's Judith Jameson. I'm here with Lou, and we are here to make up or break up. So that's what we're doing today. We're either going to make up or break up, Lou.
Okay. All right, fine. I can go with that.
I know. I decided to throw that out. I'm being kind of spunky this morning because I'm on my second cup of coffee. So look out.
All right. So we're ready to go.
That's right. We're ready to go. And how are you doing? Because it's a new year and all.
Doing all right. I'm battling a little bit of a cold, but I'm doing all right.
Yeah, there's all kinds of little colds and stuff out there. It's like it's inevitable, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I woke up feeling like that today, and honestly, it sounds kind of silly, but you wouldn't think you'd have allergies in the middle of the winter. But when I take a Zyrtec, like within 1 or 2 hours, I feel a lot better. And I was feeling kind of crappy in the morning. I woke up early, and I'm like, oh no, I think I'm coming down with something. But try taking a Zyrtec every now and then; it might clear you right out.
No, maybe. It just I got a little bit of a cough, and last night the chills, but that all cleared up pretty quickly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I feel better today. Just a little, just a little thick-headed from it, but no respiratory, and just a little tickle cough, not even a respiratory cough. So I don't know.
That's good, because if you thought it was something else,
Well, I'll go get tested, but you can't get tests nowadays either.
That's what I mean. I'm like, it's a good thing you're not feeling super sick or think it might be that, because forget it. Have you seen the news? It's crazy out there.
Yep. Yeah. My daughter, I met her on Sunday, and she had a cold going, and she'd tested negative, and her business, she's on top of it all the time. So I think I got it from her, actually.
Oh, do you think she has a bunch of home kits so she can do it easily enough? Because standing in line is pretty unpleasant.
Yeah, I don't know what her technique is, but her and her husband now have to get tested pretty regularly. He works with kids. He's an occupational therapist, so they're getting tested all the time. So.
Yep. Husband, when did they get married?
They got married. They did the civil ceremony, about a month ago in the Boston Public Gardens, and then they're doing a ceremony in Ireland in April. They had to get the legal wedding done before they went, so we're in Ireland in April, and then the reception is next September, I guess. I don't know.
Well, that's crazy.
Yeah.
You'd think you just have the reception in Ireland, but I suppose a lot of people won't go to that.
Yeah, it's going to be a small crew going over there for sure. We were laughing about it. I have a cousin about my age, and his son married a Mexican woman, and there were several ceremonies, because there was ceremony in the United States, there in Texas, ceremony in the United States, ceremony in Mexico, different families. It's like they did like 4 ceremonies, and we were laughing about it a couple of years ago, and I was kidding her today, because you were talking about Brian and his 4 ceremonies. You're getting pretty close at this point.
Oh, that is so funny. Yeah. Did you guys go to Mexico for that?
No, we didn't go. We weren't part of that thing, but and it was they had to do, sometimes with marriages you have to do some that more traditional. They had to do a more traditional Mexican ceremony, and they did an American ceremony, and then both sides of her family, it was just weird, but they ended up doing a bunch of different weddings and a separate reception too. So, and by the way, that was the second wedding for both of them.
No way.
Yeah.
But they still did all the ceremonies. How funny is that?
Yeah, you got to take care of the family, right? The family wants a traditional, the family wanted a traditional Mexican ceremony, and one in her hometown. So,
yep. Well, it's one of those things where they may not have been all able to come up, and that's why they could celebrate down there with their friends and things. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, we're pretty much not all flying up to Texas.
Yeah. So Sarah did the civil ceremony, and just to get it legally done, because the wedding I don't know what the legalities are, but the wedding in Ireland wouldn't be legal in the United States. I don't know what it is, and she wants to go to Ireland and have a ceremony over there. Basically, it's a photo shoot. She's a photographer, so basically the ceremony is a photo shoot. But
right, so that's cool. She can have her own wedding pictures posted on her website as example of
Yep.
Although she wouldn't be taking them, so I guess that's not quite the same thing. But yeah, well, this is a good segue, because we're talking about weddings and exciting, positive times, and I wanted to start today with some positive things. And actually, the topic I'm talking about is like secrets to successful marriages, what makes a good marriage, what doesn't. And why do we always look at those people in the grocery store who just look totally disheveled, totally weird, and we go, how come they look happy? They look kind of weird, but they seem happy and they're married. And what's with that? Like, and I always tell people, your goal is not to take what you've got and shine it up and make it better. What we're really doing is we're deconstructing it and reconstructing it. So when I'm working with couples, my goal is forget all the stuff in the past. You already told me about that. Now we're not going to talk about it ever again. And we're just going to start out with what are some positive habits? What are some positive things to do?
Yep.
And when you start with like that positive energy, as opposed to like tearing people down, it's like a light goes on. And I tell people, if they stick with me and they hang out for several months, not for several years, this is just for several months. Remember, we are solutions focused. Okay, everybody. When clients work with me, or even like my friend Katrina, who was on before, she might come on next week.
Mm-hmm.
She's a fellow marriage enthusiast like myself.
Yes.
We love the institution. We like people being coupled up, not because they have to, but because if you're going to hunker down with somebody, make it good. And she and I are going to be running another good segue today. She and I are running a seminar on January 19th, and it's from 7 to 8 p.m. East Coast time. And so for her, it'll be 4:00, and it's just for women. The topics will be similar to when she came on here in like November.
Yep.
Where we talked about how can you improve the marriage that you're in right now with hands-on advice to improve your marriage by at least 25%. Now, I don't know anybody out there that would say, nah, I'm just going to keep it as is. It's fine.
Yeah.
I think everybody can use improvements. Everybody can use new tips. Everybody can hear different ideas, and we have some discussions and say, wow, you know what? I think I will try that because so-and-so in the seminar talked about it and they said that it was successful for them. This one's unique in the sense that although I work with men and women, Katrina specializes in working with women. And so a lot of times when we partner up to work together with our marriage seminars, we focus on women.
Yep.
And the nice thing about that, which is going to sound silly, but the nice thing about focusing on women and showing them how to improve a marriage or even a long-term relationship, like if people are in a relationship, this is for them as well. That you don't have to be married.
Right.
But what we find is when there's a time and a place for mixed men and women, and there's a time and a place for just men, and there's a time and a place for just women, right? And when we do this with women, we can be more, a little bit more relaxed and share more personal, intimate kind of stories that we might not necessarily say with like two guys in the room.
Right.
And what I love is that we have this plan where the seminar on the 19th is free. And we're offering that just to women who are married or in a long-term relationship, or, you know what, maybe you just want to attend because you're hoping to get into a relationship and you want to get some tips on that. So it's going to be a free seminar. And then during the seminar, we're going to offer an incredible 5-week offer to people, which is a $1,200 to $1,500 value if you took our hourly rates and put it all together for only $249.
Wow. Very nice.
So you can't get therapy for that. You can't get coaching for that, but you can come and get this with us.
Yep.
And the follow-up program, again, will be just for women, but we're going to go much deeper into different topics like intimacy and sexuality. Another one's on communication and being truthful. What does that look like? What does it not look like?
Yeah.
And the communication thing is also about conflict, right? And that's something that you and I talk a lot about because most people don't like conflict, including you, Lou.
I do not, no.
What do you call yourself? Conflict averse or
Conflict averse. Yeah, I'm highly conflict averse.
Like literally, if you saw something going on at a grocery store, would you usually make the decision to just keep on walking? Like,
well, in a grocery store with other people, that's a little bit different because I don't have an emotional stake in that.
yep.
But within a relationship, I don't like conflict because it's draining. It hits really hard. I take it really hard. I'm not,
Mhm.
a lot of people, this is one of the things with men and women. A lot of people have different approaches to conflict, and a lot of people can flare up and then, 15 minutes later, they're fine. And, it's no big deal. It just got emotional in the moment. And, that stuff lands with me. It's a little hard for me. I take it a little harder. I absorb it a little bit more. So, I just I don't like conflict. Find another way to deal with it. It doesn't have to be a conflict.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, so, but the reality is you're conflict averse, but your girlfriend probably doesn't have a problem with like spewing out something that's bothering her, because women tend to be talkers and men tend to be thinkers, but they also like to fix things if we can be specific with them.
Yeah.
So what do you do when something comes up? If you're conflict averse, how does that work out with someone that actually likes to say what's on her mind? How do you maneuver that?
This isn't advice by any stretch of the imagination because I'm not good at it, but
pre-qualifier, right?
because I'm not good at it, but I weather the storm and then try to act accordingly. Try to take the lesson learned and not walk into that particular buzzsaw again.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what's interesting about that is, would you say that most of the time when your girlfriend has something to bring up, it's obviously something that's bothering her or whatever, or she wants more of something, like, we don't go to the movies anymore, whatever it is.
Yep.
Do you just mostly listen and then respond, or do you get into more of a conversation? Like,
No.
what's your style when you guys do this?
No, I listen and then, try to just react accordingly in a way that's going to, first of all, because here's what happens. And we've had this discussion before. When you attack somebody, attack may not be the right word, but we'll use it for the sake of this discussion. Right. When you attack somebody, there's only two responses: retaliation or circling the wagons. And neither one of them is productive. And, that's the thing with me. And I try not to respond because that's never productive. And I'm too old for that stuff. When someone wants the conflict and you go at it, all it does is escalate. So, I'll usually just circle the wagons and just try to, again, weather the storm and then try to take lessons from it and move forward from there.
So here's an example, and I'm not saying this is your example by any means, but say you guys are washing dishes or cleaning up after dinner, and she says, I feel like we never go out anymore. And the assumption when you hear that is, you're not a good boyfriend, or my husband's not a good husband.
Yes.
Because you're basically kind of venting and insinuating, how come you never asked me about going out to dinner?
Right.
So to me, that's sort of a provocative statement. You could respond in a lot of different ways. So do you say, well, like in what way or anything? Because sometimes we say things like that, but the truth is you might be thinking that's not true. We go out like every week and a half. And you might be thinking, so if we went out for drinks on a Wednesday and had clams, does that not count? Like we had oysters, raw oysters, and then we left. So is that not like considered a partial sort of kind of date? Like, or do you just say, all right, let's plan something for, like, do you just take it more the high road and not say, well, that's not true because we go out like almost once a week?
No, I won't. I won't go back.
Say
I won't
that's
dispute.
Not true.
I won't dispute. No, because at a certain point in certain situations, I found that's non-productive. Because the same way, like you just described it, if she has a complaint about something like that, we don't go out or whatever it is, it could be a number of different things, but whatever it is, you're totally
that's just an example.
You're totally accurate. I take it personally. I take it as that's a character evaluation on me. Right. Which is not
like because she's kind of saying you don't ask me out. Right.
Or, you're inadequate or, whatever. I take it personally. And see, that's part of, this is with conflict. I think one of the things that's important is realizing your role in the conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that I take it so personally escalates our level of conflict, because I tend to get I tend to get a little bit flustered because of that. So it's no longer about, whatever it is she's talking about. It's that I'm being attacked personally. And so emotionally, I respond that way. I don't respond to her that way because, again, I realize I'm a little self-aware and I understand I'm probably taking this a little bit too personally.
Right.
Point. So that's something I have to control,
right.
from there. So I don't, like I said, basically for me, it's weathering the storm. It's easing the conflict as much as possible, or getting through the cycle of the conflict as much as possible, and then acting accordingly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So usually it's just noting what they said and saying, okay, let's do that again soon. Or okay, I'll try to clean the dishes more often. Like, it's more, you sort of respond. I don't want to say like acquiesce, but you sort of say whatever that is. It's like, okay, well, I'll, try to do better or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like say it was something about, I feel like if I don't say something, the leaves never get raked,
Right.
then you might be like, I hadn't really thought of it that way. I thought, I take my time. I do the leaves when I do the leaves, but
right. Yeah,
that kind of thing. But in the past, were you ever more reactive and defensive? Because I feel like your style all along has been more this. Like,
yeah. I think early on in a relationship, I was a little bit more responsive. But again, what happens is, and I know how this is going to sound. I don't mean it this way, but that's not a productive approach. Once we're in conflict mode, because she gets emotional about it too, and then what happens is, when you get emotional, when I'm emotional because I feel I'm being personally persecuted, or it's a personal thing, then my reactions are inappropriate, right? Because I'm reacting to the wrong thing, and I'm reacting too strongly, to what she's saying, because I'm taking it personally. And oftentimes with her, disputing her, she reacts too strongly because I'm thinking she thinks disputing her is a personal thing to her as well. So, in other words, when you get into these conflict situations, for me, it's more trying to deal with them effectively. The conflict, to me, the conflict is unnecessary to fix whatever it is we're dealing with.
Wait, what does that say? That again?
For me, conflict is never necessary. So if she's got an issue, talk to me and we'll work through it. I'll do what I can. Some of it's not realistic, or maybe you don't see things all the way. We can talk about it and go through it. That's the way I'd prefer to do it. But oftentimes when you get into that situation of a conflict, once it's become a conflict, this has been something for a while, and it's been building up. And, but the conflict just confuses everything. It just everyone gets defensive, right? And everyone is dealing with the conflict as opposed to dealing with the issue. So I'm always just trying to get out of conflict mode. And then we'll go, we don't need the conflict. We can deal with this. Hopefully we can sit down and talk about this, or I can modify the behavior. I can try to acquiesce in a way that's going to ease her problems with the situation.
Yeah. So,
but the first thing, it's triage for me. I don't like the conflict. So it's triage. If we're in conflict, end the conflict, and then we'll deal with this.
And I think the problem, though, with most people is I think the majority of people are, their reaction is to not control their reaction.
Right.
And if we feel like you said, it's like, if we feel like we're being attacked or criticized, our natural reaction is to justify and to defend ourselves, as opposed to saying, and I know it sounds like corny shrink talk, but they say, like, sometimes diffusing an argument is like, I hadn't really thought of it that way. Which isn't saying that you agree with whatever their critique is, but you're saying, I hadn't really thought of myself that way, or I never saw myself as coming across that way at the holidays, or, when we have little Billy at the bus stop, I just thought I was just being a parent. But whereas the other one might say, no, you control everything. It's like, we storm out the door, we go to the bus stop, you kind of ignore me. I'm kind of like walking behind you guys. And then you're like fixing little Billy's backpack. And, the bus comes along and you give him a big hug and a kiss. And before I can even say goodbye to him, you push him Billy onto the bus.
Yeah.
And so someone that's a mom or a dad like that especially if it's like, if you're the stepdad or the stepmom, the parent, the biological parent is naturally going to be more, well, presumably would be more loving and doting and caring and whatnot with their child. But
right.
That's the kind of thing where the parent just thinks they're being a parent. Whereas in this scenario, I'm describing like a boyfriend or a stepdad, and they're going to be feeling like there's like no room for me. Like, why am I even walking to the bus? Right.
Yeah. Right.
Like, I want to be part of the bus thing. I want to be part of the family, but I'm not, not really feeling like I'm even acknowledged during that. And that can be a hard conversation because, especially if someone's been a single mom and now you're in this, let's just say you're married and you're in this new marriage, you love and respect this guy, but at the same time, there's always a part of you that feels like, but I'm the parent and I'm doing the majority of the parenting. But to be honest, things like going to the school bus and things, those are things that you can relinquish and be more open with. Discipline is a little bit different.
Yeah.
That's a really dicey area for step parenting. And we'll talk about step parenting during a different week.
Yeah.
But that whole blended family, I mean, first of all, it's a myth. The Brady Bunch doesn't exist, right?
Right.
And
yeah, exactly.
if it does, it's often because the kids are, the two sets of families are so independent that, this spouse has their kids going off to soccer all the time. And this spouse has their kids, getting tutored or taking music lessons or whatever they're doing. And in that kind of scenario, it can be sort of like the Brady Bunch, because it's not like you have all the kids hanging around the house doing nothing.
Yeah.
Right. And nowadays that's the case, because nowadays people are in activities almost every afternoon of the week, which I don't agree with, by the way, just for the record. I think it's insane.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say it this way, but look at us. We just played every afternoon, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I mean,
but
it's crazy.
Step parenting is hard, or dealing with that, because there are differences. There are established differences in the way you approach problems with the kids, or you approach raising the kids, and those conflicts. When you have different viewpoints on something, it's tough. I think sometimes you have to relinquish. You just got to go, well, it's between you two, but it's hard sometimes.
Yeah, it is hard. And so we'll talk about that sometime. But one of the things I wanted to talk about today is something that we've talked about before, which is from this book that I love, 10 Choices Successful Couples Make. And in this book, what I love is the first one is really, before I ever read this book a couple of years ago, my approach with couples always was, the first step is you guys have to both be all in. And that's a really scary spot, because all in says that even if you have a bad day before you meet with me again, that doesn't break what we're doing, and it doesn't break your marriage.
Yep.
And what I find is that if I don't explain this to people up front, I find that one of the major reasons why the marriage counseling doesn't work, traditional marriage counselors, with a psychologist or with a licensed social worker, is because, number one, they're trained to ask questions so that the people are answering and listening to their own thoughts. And the second thing is, they don't usually say no to a couple. They take anybody.
Yeah.
Right. But and even, it's like, just because you take insurance doesn't mean that you take anybody. And I always say, I want it to be a good fit. And what I tell people during the consultation, which is no charge, I mean, you can't get a free consult with a counselor or a marriage counselor or a therapist. That's not how they work. It's like, if you want to check me out, book yourself an appointment, pay for it.
Yep.
Neither you come back or you don't. And my feeling is, no, I want to get people on the right footing during a consultation to see if I'm a good fit for them and they're a good fit for me. And one of the things that I look for is the first piece of advice that they have in this book, which is, when they talk about the 10 choices that happy, successful couples make, the first one is I choose to believe. And that is such a key point that nobody ever talks about. But I sort of based my my marriage coaching and my date coaching on this without ever having read this, that you have to be all in and actually believe that change is possible. And I recently was talking to somebody during a consult, and that was for divorce coaching. And one of the things that he said was, it really made me sad. They'd gone to counseling for like 6 or 7 months, which, and they weren't really getting very far. The first 4 or 5 months was her just basically trashing him in every appointment. So who wants to go back to that?
Right. Yeah.
But he really wanted to save the relationship, so he kept going back. And at a certain point, the therapist said, okay, like now, right? He'd been listening and they'd been talking about the things. At a certain point, like 4 or 5 months into this, 6 or 7 months, the therapist looks at the wife after she'd been able to do this for 4 or 5 months. And he said, okay, so we've heard all the things that he hasn't done, that he hasn't kept up with, the parenting, the this, the that, the doctor's appointments, everything. Now we're at an interesting juncture. We're at this crossroads where he's actually worked on and accomplished basically your to-do list. So the things that you said needed to change, that needed to become better, he's done it. And so let's start talking about different things and how, and now we can move forward. Well, she didn't like that because, first of all, he was basically in a subtle way telling her no more husband bashing.
Yep.
Right.
He was validating her.
Right.
Yep.
And he was validating the fact that, hey, let's stop for a session or two and look at all the things that he's done. And then she ended up saying, nope, it's too late.
Yeah.
And the therapist kind of looked at her like, and basically said, which I have a lot of respect for, with all due respect, I've been doing this for 35 years. I've never had a couple in here who had a laundry list for each other. They finally did it because they knew that, it's like, do this counseling or we're going to get a divorce.
Right.
They shape up. They do all the things that the other spouse wants. And he said, but I've never had a couple that like hits the check marks and then you completely move the goalpost and say too late, as if the goalpost was back here, which it wasn't.
Yep.
Because when we first met 5 months ago, you said these are the things that he has to do. And then you continued to talk about them every 2 weeks.
Right.
And as you can imagine, the guys, hence the consultation for the divorce coaching and whatnot, the guy's devastated. It's just, these are the kinds of stories that drive me nuts.
Yep.
Because I wouldn't have let one spouse ever dominate meetings ever, not even the first meeting. And the secret and the sauce for me is that all the crappy things, you have to tell me about them privately, like this, like you and I would be talking, and then I would meet with your girlfriend separately. And then it's like, duly noted. Now I know what you have a problem with, and now I know what she has a problem with, and I'm going to work forward.
Right.
Working on a plan. But, that just really broke my heart because that was essentially a waste of time.
Yeah. And too many people go to marriage counseling looking for validation. In other words, the wife often takes, not to be sexist here.
Yeah, go for it, Lou.
The wife will often take the husband to marriage counseling because she wants benediction from the marriage counselor. She wants him or her to tell her partner, yeah, she's right. You're not doing this. You gotta pick it up. You gotta go forward. In that case, the guy did, and still was no response here. But a lot of times that's how marriage counseling is. They want someone on their side. They want someone to back them up on this statement. Right. And I'm guessing you've seen it a number of times and again, not to be sexist here, but
no, that's okay.
I'm guessing with women, a lot of times they'll go in and they won't get the backing of the marriage counselor, so they get frustrated and drop the counseling. Because what they were looking for was a second voice saying, yeah, she's right. And they don't get that.
Right. Well, when I'm working with couples, especially if there's a really difficult thing going on, which happens, right? Something difficult happens, like, with this one couple I'm working with, I'm thinking of something in particular. And to be honest, both people were making a valid point. So even though it was, she had definitely done and said things, but he also had done and said things. And during that difficult argument, which I found out about after the fact, they were not operating with the toolkit I gave them. Right.
Yep.
So part of what I'm doing with couples is saying, let's keep reminding ourselves, right, that the first step, just like in this book, the first of the 10 success points of a marriage or a relationship is, I believe. And so I had to stop them. And I'm like, okay, let's stop. Right. All right. All right. This is out of control. I get it. I hear it. Because then, like, what happened was that they were sort of reliving that argument and like,
Right.
well, then you said this. And then it was like, yeah, because I felt like this. So I had to lash out. And I'm sorry I did that, but I lashed out. And I'm like, oh, here it goes. We're sliding down a hill.
Yep.
Nope. We're not allowed to do this. I'm like, this is where we stop and we say, take a breath. You look at one spouse and you say, do you still love this person? Yes. Do you believe that this is a person that you're meant to be with in a marriage? Yes. And no buts. You can't say yes, but I don't like it when he does, right? Okay. Stop right there. And then I look at the husband. I'm like, okay. Well, I didn't look at him actually. This was all by phone the other day. So I said to the husband, no more talk, no more defense. No, sometimes they even comment on each other's faces. Like, well, look at her look. Like, look at the look I'm getting. I'm like, no. So I looked at the husband, through the phone, and I said, okay, stop. So do you love this person? He's like, yeah, I do. I love her. I'm like, okay. So then I looked at her. I'm like, so you hear that, right? And she's like, yeah. I didn't know what she's thinking, but he said this thing, I'm like, you can love someone and still hurt them.
Yeah.
You can love someone and want to be in a marriage, but still say stupid things in an argument, which is why, in a way, you're like overly diffused because you just won't let the wick get lit. You're just like, oh, here comes the candle. Here it comes. And you're like, yeah, I'm not even touching that. I'm not touching the lighter or the match. But
what you're talking about is safety. And this is so important because I'll give this example. I've been telling you to watch Yellowstone.
Oh, we just watched the first episode and we laughed so hard because it kept going. I'm like,
oh, it's a 90. Yeah, the first episode's 90 minutes, but
we were laughing so hard. We're like, we both looked at each other at one point. We're like, because I'm so accusatory. I'm like, dude, did you sit on the clicker or something? You go into the second one? He's like, no, I don't think so. I don't think I even touched it.
But there's a perfect example in there. There's this couple in there, Beth and Rip, and they're both high conflict individuals, right? Beth especially. But they have this relationship going, and I love their relationship in so many ways because the safety thing comes through all the time. There's one scene that I remember that I just loved where they had this dispute over, she kind of took in this boy who'd lost his father to a drug overdose and stuff like that. And they were having a dispute about what to do with the boy. And at the end of they had this discussion. And again, they're both high conflict, so they're going for it. And she looks at Rip and she says, I love you. And I'm going to see you tonight, but F you. And she walks away and Rip chuckles. And it's like, that's conflict with safety. That's like, yeah, we're having conflict about this and we're going at each other pretty hard, but it doesn't mean I don't love you. And it doesn't mean we've got a problem. And you can go into conflict with safety when you know it's not a deal breaker, when you know it's not personal, when it's not, it's not, well, you just think I'm a real jerk or you think I'm that's the difference. Good conflict is done with that safety behind it. It's like, we're okay. I have a problem with you right now. We're okay, but I have a problem with you right now. And I love that kind of conflict is productive and useful. If you're safe, you can sit there and work things through.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's what you're talking about, right?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. And I mean, honestly, what makes that scene so funny is like very few people will say at the end of an argument, even if it's like you said, like it sounded like someone was going to work or whatever, but very few people know how to basically to de-escalate
Yeah.
and to bring because one person still wants to come out with the dagger.
Yep.
And the other person's like, ooh, I gotta like, this is getting bad. I've got to calm this down. And if you're not taught the right tools, you don't have that tool. And so that's why one of the things I do with my clients with my married couples, as I say, the first thing you do in the morning before you kiss each other, when you wake up and you roll over and you say, hey, good morning, and you have bad breath. The first thing before you do that is you say to yourself or out loud, I choose you. And that really, how sometimes they say, fake it till you make it.
Yep.
There's something to be said for that, Lou. If you say these things out loud, your brain is saying, oh, that's a positive thought about my spouse, right? So even if I'm still kind of ticked off, but I still make myself say goodnight and I make myself say, I love you. Like that's when you're in a healthy relationship when you can do that. Because with my husband and I, sometimes, well, there'll be some tension for whatever reason. And like, never do I not, say with toothpaste in my mouth or whatever, at the end of the night, especially if we've had a fight, I'll say, I love you and I still choose you. And then as a joke, I'll say, and you are stuck with me because
yeah.
D in this house is for dirt.
Yeah.
So and then he laughs and then the toothpaste comes out and we laugh about that. It's like, oh my God, why are we even talking while we're brushing our teeth? Like what's wrong with us? But we always say we love you. And it's something that I wasn't able to achieve in my last marriage in particular, because it was so contentious and there was so much friction.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, I would say after some of our arguments or some of the dumbass things that I thought he did, and I know that sounds one-sided, but he really did pull some winners. I mean, borderline more than a chapter if I were to write a book.
Yep.
I couldn't get myself to say I love you because there were times when I was like, there were so many times where I'm like, I really don't feel like I love this person.
Yep.
I don't feel like I can love and respect this person. I don't honor their choices. I don't feel honored when I have any kind of difference.
Yep.
Because we did have a lot of differences. I'm not gonna lie. But I just assumed that some of the differences we had, like in parenting and things, would smooth over, but all it did it just alienated us, right?
Yep.
And that is where the non-Brady Bunch comes in. And I like to talk about that because people think when they remarry, it's going to be the Brady Bunch.
Yeah, no.
And a lot of times people are like, oh, we've got 3 kids and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, you know what? You may think everything looks great. And it probably does as people come and go through the kitchen, grabbing a donut and going out to school. But hopefully not eating a lot of donuts. But the reality is there's at least one of those 3 or 4 kids that is struggling somehow in this whole, migration to a shared house with someone that they didn't plan on being with and siblings they didn't plan on having.
Right. Yeah.
Some of them are going to think it's great, but some of them are not going to feel it. And maybe it's not this year, but maybe when they become teenagers, it's like, oh my God, like the stepsister I loved is turned into like, teen Zilla.
Yep. Yep.
Because they do,
Yeah.
It's a terrible thing to talk about, but people have hormones as teenagers. So
the other thing with conflict that I think is really important, and it's about communication, is that you have to understand that people have to have different approaches and different sensitivities about things.
Right.
It's like things get said in conflict, but some people can say them, and I don't mean. Well, see, this is a problem for me because I don't say things I don't mean. And I won't get into a situation where I will say something that, oh boy, I wish I didn't say that. I'm very careful about these types of things. Not everybody is that way though. Some people conflict and they go off, that was their family upbringing. It's the way they interacted, whatever it is, they're less sensitive to that. And they can call you the biggest jerk in the world, and 15 minutes later they'll be fine. And like I said, for me, that lands with me, and I'm thinking about that for 2 or 3 days. It's not how she meant it,
Right.
Or it was a different thing to her saying it than it is to me hearing it, and I
Well,
think that's something you have to keep in mind.
well, yeah, and that's the thing, Lou, because how many times for me, I mean, in past relationships and stuff, I'm like, I knew I couldn't say it to them, but I wanted to say, dude, you so can't take that back because
Yep.
no offense, like I know we were in a heated argument, but it's like you said it, right?
Yeah,
like
who says that? Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Like who says something like that? Like it's out there now. You can apologize for saying it, but really what you're saying is, oops, I'm sorry that I said it out loud.
Yep.
And I think it's important for people to allow themselves though to analyze that, because if someone is saying really terrible things about you in an argument, and it's not just once, like it's one thing to like point something out, it's another thing to have like a full-blown argument about it, right?
Yep.
It's like with some of my one of the couples that a couple of the couples I'm working with right now, they're both kind of like a type A argumentative. If you say something, I'm coming back at you, and it's like, okay, I get it, but it doesn't have to be 10 or 20 minutes. Your spouse says something, then you respond, and then they defend their statement again, and then you respond. Okay, fine, you already said it. Now you've each said something. You've each got to say something a couple of times. Put it down.
Yep.
Right. Put it down. And so what I give them are the skills and the tool set that how to stop an argument as quickly as you can, because you and I know that arguments, when they're heated, okay, I'm not talking about a discussion about like which college little Billy should go to. I'm talking about an argument that's like, what we call like a big fight in the kitchen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not talking about physically, but when it's a verbally escalated yelling thing, your obligation is to grab that toolkit, take the hammer out and just slam it. Like, stop this right now.
Yep.
I use the hammer as an example as being a positive tool, right? You're smashing this thing to smithereens and it's no longer on the table.
Yep.
And couples don't know how to create an environment where they can stop, because we're human. And like, if I'm a squirrel and I'm running around the tree and you come over and you try to take my acorns or whatever, we've all seen the squirrels that that chase each other up and down a tree, right?
Right.
Usually they're just playing, but you chase me up and down because you want my acorns, and I'm like, cut it out. And like, meanwhile, I'm like making little noises and trying to scare you off, but you're like, nope, taking an acorn. So I run some more and you come right after me, right? But those are animals. Okay. So like, this is why I use the example. You see other animals like horses and things, and when they're mad at another horse, they just stomp their feet.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Or like, God forbid, you're in the middle of the woods somewhere and a wildebeest comes along, right? They're not always the friendliest, right? Or like the wild
woods do you walk in?
I know, right? What woods do I walk?
Yeah.
I know. How many times do you even get to say that word, right? But those animals, their version of an argument, right? Like they stomp their feet, they lower their head. Sometimes they like make a lot of puffing noises and things, which is kind of like, what we kind of do. But what you see when you look at like National Geographic movies and videos and things like that, right, is when you watch these video clips, the other animals respond. It's like, oh shit. Like, have you ever seen like a pack of zebras and one is just like, like enough already, right?
Yep.
And the other one's like, whoa, like they just usually kind of back off.
Right.
The only time they go head to head is when it's like two guys fighting over the female zebra.
Yeah.
Right. Like there are some species where it's like perfectly normal for two male in a herd to go after each other, but we're not animals. So we have the capability to like stomp our feet a little bit and then stop. And the other person doesn't have to always run away like in a pack of animals. They can stand there. If you're a human, you don't have to run away. You can stand there
Yep.
and acknowledge what this wildebeest is upset about.
Yep.
And as humans, we can move on. But the problem is humans are like the two male, lions in a pack. Humans tend to say, whoa, okay, it's my stuff. This is what I want. And the other one comes up and goes, well, then this is that. And when you see wild animals that act like that, like I said, it's typically over like the female that they both want. We tend to do it because we're not doing it anymore over like the female that we want in our cave, like from caveman days.
Yep.
We're not trying to drag Wilma and Betty into our cave.
Okay.
So our natural reaction is, yeah, we're going to, fight for things, but we don't know how to stop it.
Right.
And in the wilderness, it's great when two animals can figure out how to stop it. They have a fight. Somebody gets like poked in the head. There's a little blood. Hopefully they don't die. Right. The lion that didn't win doesn't get the girl.
Yep.
Someone wins. Someone gets the girl. Somebody doesn't get the girl. Humans need to be taught like what to do with that angst when the two people are going at each other. And it's not easy to do. I mean, you learned at some point to back off. You learned at some point, this just gets worse.
Yeah.
I'm not going there. Whereas your best friend could be the type of guy that says, yeah, I'm going there. Next time, Susie comes around and tries to, toss me into my locker, I'm going to push her back. And you're like, dude, don't do that. Like, that's not even worth it. That's just what she does. But then your friend is like, no, I'm pushing back.
But Janet and I got into a silly little flare up. It was last night, and it was over the silliest thing. But this is how human reaction
always is.
Gets involved into it. Like we had boiled some chicken for the animals, dog and a couple cats, and I had pulled out some of the chicken for the cats and put it down.
Wait, you guys have cats too?
Yeah, we have cats too.
Dude, I missed that.
Yeah. But so she's sitting there and she sees the chicken that I put out and she says, you didn't make the chicken small enough for the cats. And I said, okay, that was it, because I'm taking it as on a series of bigger things. It's like, okay, just another criticism, and she feels she has to educate me. And I didn't want to get involved in it. It's like, okay, I'll make it smaller. I didn't say that. I'm just said, okay. She goes, what do you mean? Okay? She goes,
Meanwhile,
what do you mean?
You're thinking,
yeah.
Was there a part of you that probably could have said, not for nothing, but I'm pretty sure the cats can figure this out. They eat mice.
Oh, I certainly wanted to. Yes. But that would have been non-productive.
That was like her thing. Cats get small, little tiny pieces, and that's just like what they do.
So I said okay, and she got a little upset. She goes, "What do you mean okay?"
No, she caught she caught you just diffusing and not going anywhere, right?
Yeah. And I said, "You made your point. I heard what you said. I'll act accordingly." That's what I meant by okay. And it was just a little flare up there, but it's like it's our different levels. We conflict differently. You talk about love languages all the time. There's conflict languages too. And we handle these things differently. And it's like, I didn't, and see, part of this was my poor reaction. And I'm kind of aware of it because I took it personally. Okay. You're educating me again. I don't need to be educated.
That's right.
And okay. And you make a good point, and it's just like, I don't want to go through this. And what I knew was there were going to be 2 or 3 rounds of this. They can't eat. They do this like this. Okay, I get it. I'll make it smaller next time. So I just wanted to move on with the rest of my night.
Yeah.
But that was my sensitivities. So, I could have reacted. I could have been with a different tone and said, okay, I'll make it smaller next time, and probably would have passed. But she probably sent some of my personal stuff in that reaction to her. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I had a part in it. I had a part in that little conflict, and she probably just needed to be heard. I think that's one of the things with her a lot. She needs to be heard. If she's got to go a couple laps around the track, then okay, let her do a couple laps around the track. She needs to feel like she's being heard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there are parts of this, and you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware of your sensitivity. You have to be aware of your reactions. And so my reactions to conflict within our relationship could probably be better because I take a lot of stuff personally and I have trouble controlling that. So I have to be more aware of that. And, sometimes it's not personal.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what we're going to talk about next week is after you glom on to this concept and the fact that you believe that this is the right relationship and that you can make it better, that there are ways to improve, not we're going to work on things and then I'm going to say, nah, still not into it, going, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Once you believe, then the next thing that they talk about in this book is communication, which is exactly where we went in this whole conversation. But the interesting part is, remember, these are 10 choices that healthy couples make. So the second one is I choose to communicate well. Okay. And choosing to communicate accurately. That's a good one. Yeah. So we're going to talk about that next week and what that means. So the couples can take some really concrete tips from these shows and understand what we're talking about. Because if you just say, oh, most problems with couples are finances and communication.
Yeah.
Well, finances is a pretty broad brush statement. And so is communication. Because we all, when I hear the word communication, it's a catch-all. It's like telling me, it's like saying, it's like coming up to me and saying the word car.
Yep.
It doesn't mean anything. There's lots of different cars. There's even trucks. So communication, there's lots of communication and there's lots of different types of communication. But what we're going to be talking about is verbal and nonverbal, my personal favorite.
Yeah. I always sum this up as, and sometimes we'll talk about this. I always sum this up as approach. It's like a lot of times I'll say, why couldn't that conflict have been this? In other words, you're a jerk. You didn't do this. Why couldn't it have been, could you do this for me? Because I need it done.
Right.
And that's approach. And a lot of times everyone tries to imply their own approach and their own sensitivities on the other person, and they need something different. So you have to be aware. And you've seen it if you have kids. If you have multiple kids, you can't use the same approach for both kids, or 2 or 3 different kids. Everyone needs something different. People at work, your coworkers, things like that. You need to approach people differently. Some people need to be kicked. Some people need to be cajoled. Some people need to be, patted on the back and say, I really need you to do this, that type of thing. You got to take different approaches with different people. And that's true in relationships too. You got to be able to adapt to your partner's needed approach, what they need, how they need to be broached about these things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, so I know we're going to wrap up, but one of the things I'm thinking about too is my husband, he works long hours and I tend to sort of rely on him to do things that are related to chores and just stuff like that.
Yep.
But there have been a couple of times where I hired a handyman to come in for 4 hours and just give him a punch list because
guys hate that.
I know, but I couldn't take it anymore. I'm like, you know what?
No, I know.
It bothers me not to have these things done.
Yep.
And so I suggest to any couple that they allow each other, the ability to do that.
Yep.
Because that way you get all these stupid little things done and you're not waiting for 6 months.
But you see, here's the thing where approach could play in there into that situation where if the approach was, listen, I needed this done and you weren't getting this done. You were dropping the ball. I have to get this done. So I got the guy. That's one approach. The other approach is, look, I know you're busy. I know you're tired and, but, this is something that needs to be done. Those are 2 different approaches. And some people need one approach and some people need the other. And it's good to be aware of. In other words, a conflict is you were screwing up. So I had to bring somebody in. Yeah. That's conflict. The other way to approach it is, look, I know you work hard and I know you're tired and I know this stuff gets put on the back burner because you got so many things on your mind. Let's just have this guy in. Those are 2 different approaches, gets to the same result, but without adding conflict, without making the person feel bad. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. I know what you mean.
Yep.
So anywho, all right. Well, we're going to have to wrap up for today. I've got to go. You've got to go. It's after 12, but I'm so glad we came in and we talked about some positive ideas, things that people can work on with their marriages. If you watched it to the end, please share this video and remember that on January 19th, I'm running a 1-hour free seminar on ways that you can improve your marriage immediately or your long-term relationship. It's for women. And it's going to be at 7:00 at night, East Coast time. But my partner in crime is from the West Coast, from the LA area.
Yep.
So people can be from any state and any of the time zones.
Past episodes of the show, make sure you check them out. Make sure you share them with people who you think would benefit from them. That's very important. And it's a great gift to just share some help with people. And we'll see you next week, right?
That's right. Everybody be well, be healthy, and we'll see you next week.
Those girls start hanging around, talking me down.